Debt is the worst kind of poverty, and those who are quick to borrow are usually slow to pay. China knows this better than most. Using its checkbook policy, it has crafted a belt around India, constraining New Delhi's policymaking. Now, India looks to even the score with its own parallel discourse dubbed the Necklace of Diamonds. Running from Central Asia to Mongolia, Japan, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore, Seychelles, Oman, and Iran, its purpose is to form a containment block around China. New Delhi is holding joint defense drills and doing combined arms exercises. It is expanding its economic partnerships and forming industrial corridors. And more recently, it has been striking game-changing arms deals. For India and China, the idea of choking the other sits at the core of their geopolitics, whether by a string of pearls or a necklace of diamonds. Both seek to dominate Asia-Pacific and leave the other's economy in the dust. Global conflicts like China and India may seem a world away, but the damaging impacts can be felt in your wallets and savings. Last year, China's economy grew at its lowest rate in nearly a century. This slowdown is felt worldwide. The S&P 500 lost a record $36 trillion, and a survey by New Reality Check shows that more than half of Americans making six figures are living paycheck to paycheck. But if you think people like CEOs waste away their money in saving accounts, think again. They're pouring hundreds of millions into assets that aren't correlated to the stock market. That's why I and thousands of subscribers use a platform dealing in these same assets, one that paid out over $25.8 million last year. I'm talking about investing with Masterworks, the sponsor of today's video. I've invested with and talked about Masterworks for over a year now, and Masterworks' results have only gotten better with time. 11 exits now, and with each returning a profit to users like you. Masterworks has done so well, they've had to keep using their waitlist as paintings can sell out in minutes. But I've been a partner and investor for so long, they're giving you priority access right now. Just click the link below. Like a majestic castle, India stands tall and proud, but its long, winding coastline exposes it to the elements. The Indian Ocean accounts for nearly a fifth of the water on the Earth's surface. It spans 3 continents, 28 countries, and is a major route for international trade, connecting the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. And while the Indian Ocean brings prosperity through trade, it also served as a point of entry for colonial powers in the past. Today, China looks to continue that strategy, and key to this is the string of pearls. It goes from Mombasa to Djibouti, to Karachi and Gwadar, to Colombo and Hambantota, all the way to Chittagong, Sittwe, and the Coco Islands. Like a pearl diver, China has cast its net far and wide, plucking precious pearls from the depths of the Indian Ocean. But geopolitics is often driven by an insatiable appetite. Beijing is currently negotiating for dual-use rights in Oman's Duqm port. It is building a deepwater port in Kenya's Lamu Island, and it is lobbying the Maldives for a submarine base at Marau. But with each pearl added to its string, China's debt trap policy has left a trail of broken promises. Nations indebted and unable to repay loans are coerced into geostrategic concessions. Understandably, frustrations are plenty. India is looking to capitalize on those grievances. The result is the Necklace of Diamonds strategy, by which New Delhi seeks to create a security umbrella by increasing its naval bases abroad, forging new military partnerships, and expanding its power projection across Asia-Pacific. The ultimate goal is to incapacitate China's string of pearls. Since its disclosure, India has been on a diplomatic spree, signing deals left and right. In 2015, Seychelles agreed to construct a naval base on Assumption Island, leased exclusively to the Indian Navy. Having a foothold in Seychelles would give India a base of operations on the African continent. With the right equipment, the Indian Navy could counter Chinese presence in Djibouti and Kenya. Plus, Assumption Island sits just north of the Mozambique Channel, where a lot of maritime trade passes. A year later, in 2016, Iran inked a deal with India to build its first deepwater port in Chabahar. From Chabahar onwards, India would connect to the north-south transport corridor, which links Mumbai to Moscow via Iran and Azerbaijan. From Indian perspective, having a stake in Chabahar directly counters China's presence in Karachi and Gwadar port. In conjunction with the Iranian port, India also secured access to Oman's strategic port of Duqm. The pact was signed in 2018, and by having a footing in the Arabian Peninsula, India strengthened its seaborne hydrocarbon imports from the Gulf. Plus, since Duqm port is located right between Djibouti and Gwadar, it also serves as a counterpoint to those Chinese positions. What's unique about Duqm is that it's also situated near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most consequential choke points. So India is hitting not 2, but 3 birds with one stone. Also in 2018, New Delhi signed an agreement with Singapore that allows the Indian Navy logistical support, including rearming and refueling at Singapore's Changi Naval Base. The Singapore Pact differs from the previous deals because it allows India to protrude into the South China Sea. One such base is of course not enough, so India also signed a deal with Indonesia in the same year and secured military access to Sabang port, located neatly at the northern entrance of the Malacca Strait. Interestingly, Sabang port is about 40 meters in depth, so India could use it to station its submarines. Either way, approximately 80% of China's crude oil and natural gas imports pass through the Malacca Strait, making it a strategic vulnerability for Beijing, but a strategic opportunity for New Delhi. Likewise, since 2020, India has been militarizing its Andaman and Nicobar archipelago, which sits north of the Malacca Strait. The more assets the Indian Navy can bring to the periphery, the more bargaining power New Delhi gains over Beijing. But apart from bolstering naval bases, India is also working to enhance relations with the nations surrounding China. In 2015, India and Mongolia agreed to develop a bilateral air corridor to boost trade, tourism, and people-to-people contact. Mongolia hopes that India can negotiate with either Russia or China on an equal footing, which would help Mongolia balance its policymaking. Also in 2015, Indian Prime Minister Modi went on a grand tour across Central Asia, meeting with the leaders of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. Central Asia is a place bursting with potential. It has hydrocarbon reserves, rare earth minerals, uranium deposits, hydropower potential, and it is a market with millions of consumers. Trade between India and the Central Asian countries have doubled since Modi's visit, and it is likely to grow further still. The more influence India can bring about in Central Asia, the more it can restrain the influence of rival powers. Later in 2017, India and Japan launched a joint initiative called the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. Its goal is to develop infrastructure, accelerate economic growth, and boost New Delhi and Tokyo's influence, while at the same time contesting China's clout in Africa. All things considered, India has kept a healthy relationship with nearly all the nations surrounding China. However, it's not all peaches and roses. India's necklace of diamonds is widely seen as feeble when compared to China's string of pearls. Nowhere is this lack of faith more visible than in the ASEAN region. While the members of ASEAN acknowledge India's many credentials, they doubt India's resolve and capacity to measure up to China. Most of this doubt stems from India's infamous bureaucracy and its failure to deliver on past promises. Even outside the ASEAN region, there is trouble. Some of the agreed upon deals are wavering. In Seychelles, for instance, China holds significant lobbying power, and Seychelles has been going back and forth on its commitments to both India and China. Meanwhile, in Iran, Indian firms have had a hard time getting things done since the country is under strict sanctions. Workarounds are constantly being negotiated so that Indian firms don't risk secondary sanctions. China is also wealthier than India. It can put money in places where India cannot. So far, China has invested about $60 billion in Africa's portion of the String of Pearls, whereas India's largest investment has been in the Chabahar port, amounting to $8 billion. Now, many of these downsides are beyond New Delhi's control, but one thing India has oversight and has somewhat dilapidated is arms sales. For context, India has set up coastal radar stations and control systems in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Seychelles, and the Maldives. And while these defensive systems are appreciated, China has provided its allies with more sophisticated weapons like submarines, combat aircraft, etc. Arms sales are a great way for improving relations and developing strategic partnerships. China has mastered the art of arms sales, and as a result, it has boosted its foothold across Asia Pacific. But India is learning from its mistakes and has started picking up on the arms sales niche. As recently as December 2022, India's BrahMos Aerospace offered to sell supersonic missiles to Vietnam and the Philippines. Both nations sit at the outer edge of China's perimeter and are deeply suspicious and antagonistic towards Beijing. The BrahMos is the fastest cruise missile in the world, flying about 3 times the speed of sound. It can carry a 200-kilo warhead, and it can be launched from submarines, warships, aircraft, and ground launchers. Clearly, Beijing isn't happy with these weapons going to Vietnam and the Philippines. But then again, that is the whole point of grand strategy. Whether it's the String of Pearls or the Diamond of Necklace, India and China's prerogative is to choke the other by controlling the terms of commerce. It's war by other means. And as New Delhi advances its Necklace of Diamonds strategy and makes it more competitive, arms sales will play an increasingly decisive role, which is not surprising. The sale of arms is the sale of influence. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Just a quick channel update. We're adding new perks to our Patreon platform with more recognition and engagement. For instance, you can now download all original maps by Caspian Report. There are no watermarks and it's totally copyright free. You can do with these maps as you will. For more perks, check out our Patreon page. The link will be in the description. Thank you for your time and Sagol.